Good evening, everyone. I know that the view is mesmerizing, but we probably should get started because we're going to have a pretty mesmerizing program. I'm Jennifer Walsh. I'm Dean of the College of Environmental Design, and I want to thank everyone here for joining us for this evening, which is our chance to celebrate the 2014 Distinguished Alumni Award winners, and they are a very distinguished group indeed. And what will, without doubt, be a compelling lecture by our keynote speaker, Majora Carter. We're extraordinarily pleased to be here in the California Memorial Stadium in the University Club. Again, spectacular view. Last year, we had it here for the first time. It was the first time it was open, and the football team was practicing. But they're not here tonight, I'm sorry. I'm sorry to say, because they were pretty entertaining, too. I'm also really happy that tonight we're joined by Mary Catherine and Robert Bergeneau, who just last summer stepped down as UC Berkeley's 10th chancellor, and who I will be putting to work in just a minute. But I thought it would be really nice I just want to say to Bob how wonderful it's been to work here with you as chancellor, and I know everybody in the CED community is really grateful for all the things that you did as chancellor, and I hope you're going to relax now. But I want to have everybody give Bob a hand. And Mary Catherine. As we speak, our new chancellor, Nicholas Dirks, is also on his way to an event with actually some other CED folks. He's on his way to Mumbai, and so is Professor Susan Ubalotti, with 15 graduate students who are working on a studio that focuses on Mumbai. Susan is leading students from architecture, planning, landscape, and urban design who, again, working together as a super studio, will compete in the 2014 Vertical Cities Asia competition this summer. Their study site is a very large informal housing site, project site in Mumbai. So the Chancellor Dirks couldn't be here this evening, but happily he's seeing some of the exciting work of our Mumbai studio, which I think in many ways reflects our deepest, most deeply held values: cross-disciplinary analysis and collaboration, to develop creative built environment solutions to some of the world's most pressing environmental, social, and economic challenges. I'm also pleased to take this occasion to recognize past and current members of the CED Dean's Advisory Council that are here tonight. The council is a select group of alumni and friends that care deeply about the College of Environmental Design and who serve as ambassadors with fellow CED alumni, alumni of the university more generally, and others whose professional and philanthropic interests align with CED's objectives. So I'd like council members to stand if they're here. Maybe not everyone is here, but we expect that Bob Lalonde, who was the founding chair of the council, will be here tonight. I don't spot Bob, but maybe he's working late on campus where he's just taken a job as the new vice chancellor for real estate. Brian Doherty from Doherty and Doherty, Gray Doherty, also from Doherty and Doherty, J. Eli Hernandez, J. Eli of Hernandez-Eli Architecture, Keith Helmetag, partner from C&G Partners, Sylvia Kwan from Kwan Hanmi Architecture, Michael Lin from American Financial Services, John Wong from SWA, Paul Wolford from HOK, Joseph Wong from Joseph Wong Design, Michael Painter from MPA, and James Crawford. I think Jim actually had to fly out today, but he was here with us earlier for the circus. So thank you very much to the council for being here and for supporting the college and guiding the college's evolution. I'm also happy to report that many of our faculty are here tonight, and I hope that not only do the alumni who are here get a chance to talk to faculty, but also the students have another chance to chat with faculty in an informal setting. Now, yesterday was day one of our annual big open house event, and it was the Circus in Worcester Hall. And we hosted 60 distinguished fellows who came to spend the afternoon with us looking at the work of almost 200 students. Some of these talented students were recognized at the end of the day for the excellence of their work, and I would really like for the distinguished alumni who are here and the other alumni and the students to be able to have time this evening to talk. And if you see a student who looks shy, please go and talk and introduce yourself. It's really important that this event brings together alumni and students and allows students to actually meet earlier generations of CED alums and benefit from their wisdom and experience. So it was an awesome day yesterday, and I would invite those who did not come this year to think about coming next year. I think it's a very exciting day. The work is really pretty spectacular, and I hope that I see some of you next year. Before we launch into the awards ceremony, I want to give my really deep thanks to the CED staff who worked really hard on the circus and the soiree this evening, especially Christina Wang and Camille Thoma and Mary Kakoma, who have done so much to make everything possible and have done a superb job. So, one of our first tasks tonight is to, and one of the main reasons we're here is to celebrate a tradition that recognizes CED alumni for their outstanding achievements in their professional careers. And I think this tradition was started by my predecessor, Harrison Fraker, who is here tonight. Harrison, where are you? Right in the back. And we're happy that you're here. Since 1998, 68 alumni have received distinguished alumni awards, and it's my pleasure tonight to add 3 people to that illustrious group. I'd like to invite Mark Francis to the stage. Mark graduated with a Bachelor's of Arts in Landscape Architecture in 1972. And he is a professor emeritus of landscape architecture and environmental design at UC Davis. Mark's work focuses on participatory landscapes at the intersections of landscape architecture, environmental psychology, geography, art, and urban design. As I said, Mark is a professor emeritus at UC Berkeley and at UC Davis, where he also founded and directed the Center for Design Research for 20 years. He's also a founding partner of the firm Co-Design MIG. Mark's been honored with over a dozen awards for his research, writing, planning, and design. In 1999, he was awarded the Centennial Medal from the American Society of Landscape Architects for Davis Central Park and Farmers Market, which is cited as one of the most significant designed landscapes of the past 100 years. That's a really important landmark. He's the only person to have received the ASLA Professional Awards in all 4 categories of design, urban design and planning, communication, and research. This is quite simply a really remarkable record. In addition to receiving the Ralph Hudson Environmental Fellowship, Mark was elected as a fellow in the American Society of Landscape Architects, fellow of the Institute of Urban Design in New York City, and fellow of the Council of Educators in Landscape Architecture. He's the author of 6 books, including The Meaning of Gardens, which was selected by the New York Times as the most important book on gardens of the year, Public Space, another book, Public Space, third book, The California Landscape Garden, and he's also written over 70 articles. Lastly, I would say, in the tradition of CED, he's been a very ardent and effective advocate for open space, working with governments and nonprofits at all levels, and very importantly, with the objective of having really participatory and democratic design. So, Mark, congratulations. I have the honor of putting this beautiful medal on you.
Very nice. Nice jewelry. Thank you. Thank you, Dean Walsh, and thank you to the college for this incredible honor. I'm very touched and very humbled by it. I wasn't quite sure what this really was when I got your letter, so I looked it up, and when you look it up, the first thing that pops up is the very first year, which was, I think, 1989. And there, staring at me, was a professor of mine named Garrett Ekbo. And for those of you that know Garrett, he was probably, or don't know Garrett, he was probably one of the most important landscape architects of the last century. And when I was a lucky person, because when I was 13, I was able to kind of discover landscape architecture. I decided I wanted to pursue that. And somebody said, well, go to Cal Poly, that's where you go. And I thought, okay, well, that's close to where we live in Santa Barbara. So I said, okay. But I thought, you know, I should at least come up and check Berkeley out. So in the middle of summer in July, I came up with a friend, looked around Worcester Hall, ventured into 311 Worcester Hall, asked the secretary, is there anyone that I can talk to? And she kind of turned around and yelled in the chair's office, Garrett, are you in there? So I am ushered into Garrett's office, who I didn't really know who that was then. And he spent about an hour and a half with me, encouraging but also challenging me to think about what it would be like to come to Cal. And I remember walking out of his office convinced that this is where I wanted to be. And it's one of the best decisions I think I've ever made in my life. So I'm extremely grateful for that. Thank you very much. I also want to thank my wife, Kirsten Lovik, who I met in Norway on my hippie tour shortly after leaving Berkeley. The rest is history. My son, Bjorn Livik Francis, who's here, and my daughter, Lynn Livik Francis, who's also a graduate of landscape architecture in the year 2000, who's with our new grandson in Oslo. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark. We actually have a lot of intergenerational CED families, as it turns out. Next person I want to ask to come forward is Merrick Gertler and also Bob Birchenow. Merrick, Masters of City Planning and City and Regional Planning in 1979. And here are some images of some of Merrick's books. And images of him with important people, too. So it gives me a lot of personal pleasure to co-introduce with the Chancellor, Merrick Gertler, who I met many years ago during a sabbatical at the University of Toronto. It was a winter semester in Toronto, and I'm a California girl, and but Merrick gave me a really warm welcome, and I had a wonderful time, and I greatly admire his work in geography and planning. He's internationally renowned for his research on the geographical underpinnings of innovation activity and the economic dynamics of city regions. Now, in 2013, Merrick began his term as the 16th president of the University of Toronto, after having previously served 5 years as dean of the university's Faculty of Arts and Sciences Division. And right here, right on either side of me, are two presidents of the University of Toronto. And so I want to hand it over to you now, Bob, to say a few words about one of your successors.
Yes. So obviously this is a great personal pleasure for me. I first met Merrick when I went from MIT to Toronto, and he was one of the faculty members I met very early on. I'll read you what the University of Toronto website says about him. First paragraph is, Professor Merrick Gertler is one of the world's foremost urban theorists and policy practitioners. He is widely known as an expert on innovation, creativity, and culture as drivers of the economic dynamism of city regions. And he's going to need all of those talents, I can absolutely assure you, to manage the University of Toronto. As you heard in March, he was, March 4th, he was named as the 16th president of the University of Toronto. I was the 14th, in fact. I decided to look up past presidents to see sort of what's normally expected. So, Merrick, you may not have known this, but you probably did. But the first president who was the Right Reverend John Strachan. At that time, you had to be an Episcopalian minister in order to be president of the university. And he served for 21 years. The next president was the Reverend John McCall. You're going to have to go back to school, to the School of Theology, who served for 32 years. So then the next one only lasted 12 years, but the one after that lasted longer than that. So there's been a tradition of extraordinarily long service in the university. Many people here, certainly I found when I came here from Toronto, have no idea of what the level of responsibility that the president of the University of Toronto takes on. So Berkeley's like a small New England college compared to the University of Toronto. So it has 3 campuses spread across the city. Downtown campus, which is somewhat larger than Berkeley, and then 2 suburban campuses, which actually during my time as president went from 4,000 to 12,000 students each as satellites. So they have about 80,000 students altogether. Even more impressive is the medical enterprise that you now are responsible for. It's the second largest medical enterprise in North America. And Merrick is now directly responsible for 20 hospitals. So just imagine that. And Merrick, you already know when some great piece of research gets done, then of course it's research done at Mount Sinai Hospital. When there's when one of the docs abuses one of the patients, then it's the professor of the University of Toronto, and you're obviously very directly responsible for this very bad behavior. You all know I can't speak, of course, particularly about his accomplishments in city city economics. However, in looking over I of course looked him up on the web, and I'm pleased to see that among his journal articles, by far the most cited article he wrote right in the middle of my time as president. I won't take complete credit for it, but I also happen to be a movie buff. In fact, I didn't anticipate actually starring in a movie until recently, but that's a whole separate story. This article, which has been highly impactful, which was published in 2003, garners about 50 citations every year continuously since then. The academic title is Tacit Knowledge and the Economic Geography of Context. However, he then has a second title. Now, it happens, as a movie buff, probably my favorite movie of all time is The Unbearable Lightness of Being. And indeed, he has as a subtitle, The Undefinable Tacitness of Being, which I thought was pretty extraordinary. So, Merrick, congratulations on this most well-deserved award, and I can't tell you how proud we are to have you as a UC Berkeley graduate.
Thank you so much.
So I have a few other things to add before the medal goes on. Merrick has received, as Bob suggested, numerous accolades, including the 2007 Award for Scholarly Distinction from the Canadian Association of Geographers, the 2014 Distinguished Scholarship Honors from the American Association of Geographers, and an honorary Doctor of Philosophy from Lund University in Sweden. He has written books including Manufacturing Culture, The Institutional Geography of Industrial Practice, another book entitled The New Industrial Geography, Regions, Regulation, and Institution, more than 80 articles, and also he's a co-editor of a very influential book, the Oxford Handbook of Economic Geography. Merrick's also been extensively engaged in policy and practice and has served as an advisor to local, regional, and national governments in Canada, in the US and Europe, and also international agencies, including OECD and the European Union. So, Merrick, we are very proud to bestow upon you this.
Thank you so much. Well, thank you so much, Jennifer and Bob. It's wonderful to be receiving this award in the company of such good friends and colleagues. And it's wonderful to be back here, not just because it was, I think, 11 degrees Fahrenheit in Toronto when we left, but that certainly
is part of the reason why I'm happy to be here. It is such a special place, Berkeley, in all kinds of ways, and that has just come back to me in so many ways over the last couple of days. This is a remarkable environment in which we all sit. And I'm reminded of a number of dimensions of how special this place is, and the experiences that I had as a student here. First and foremost, I have to single out the quality of my peers, my fellow students, who were just remarkable, and the strong sense of intellectual community that was created at this place, which was just so valuable. And I met people who were so deeply engaged in discussions about the most pressing social and economic issues of the day. And I know from having spent some time at the college yesterday that tradition continues. Of course, the faculty that I worked with here were equally as engaged in all of these issues. And more than that, what struck me was how they treated us as peers, not just as students, but really as true peers, and engaged us fully in all the intellectual debates and discussions that they themselves were immersed in. Of course, one has to comment on the magical nature of the physical setting, which is, of course, obvious to everybody who is here this evening, but also a sense that we are in the midst of one of the world's most dynamic urban regions, where the economy, of course, transforms itself and reinvents itself all the time, but where the issues, the challenges that emerge are also truly pressing and have, I think, elicited some of the most innovative and creative policy responses of any city region anywhere in the world. And that sense of the Bay Area being a kind of living laboratory for policy innovation in the urban sphere continues to this day. But it was just incredibly enervating to be a student immersed in that kind of environment. Now that I have been kicked upstairs into the big job at U of T, I'm also struck by another aspect of this place. And it's an element of its identity, which is something that we actually share very strongly at the University of Toronto, and that is, Berkeley and Toronto are two of the great public universities of the world. They are two places that combine better than just about any other universities in the world. On the one hand, a very, very strong and distinguished tradition of academic excellence and global renown, and at the same time, a very, very strong culture of accessibility and openness. This is something that we're very proud of at U of T. I know that people at Cal here are also equally proud of that dual identity. Of course, it gets harder and harder with each passing year to do justice to both aspects of that identity. But it is something that is worth fighting for. Let me just conclude by saying, again, I'm honored by this great reward or award, and I also look forward to using my new job as an opportunity to forge ever closer linkages and relationships between University of California at Berkeley and the University of Toronto. So thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Merrick. Gwendolyn. I'm going to ask Gwendolyn Wright to, yes, thank you, to approach the podium. Gwendolyn got her Master's of Architecture in 1974 and then couldn't stay away and completed her PhD in Architectural History in 1978. Gwen is a professor of architecture in Columbia University's Graduate School of Architecture, Planning, and Preservation, where in 1986 she became the first tenured woman on the school's faculty. She's perhaps most widely known to the broad general public as for her role in the PBS series The History Detectives. And I don't think most academics get fan mail like you probably did and have for many years. So I think, wow, I'm jealous. But But Gwen is widely renowned for her academic work. It focuses on the interconnections of architecture, urbanism, and political culture from the late 19th century to the present. And she's been honored with fellowships from the Guggenheim Foundation, the Getty Center for History of Art and the Humanities, the Beverly Willis Architecture Foundation, the Ford Foundation, and other institutions. And in 1985, she was elected a fellow of the Society of American Architectural Historians, and was also made a fellow, Society of American Historians, and also made a fellow of the Society of Architectural Historians, which is the highest honor in that field. Gwen is the author or editor of 6 major books, including Modern Architectures in History, and her many articles have appeared in scholarly journals and books, and also newspapers around the world. So, congratulations, Gwen.
Thank you so much, Jennifer.
Let me.
Well, the nicest necklace I've ever had. This is. Thank you so much, Jennifer, and to all of my many friends from years at Berkeley, but also from other places who've come here. For me, this award is an acknowledgement of an approach to research and design from multiple perspectives that thrived here at Berkeley in the 1970s when I received both of those degrees. We wanted to understand how architects thought, but especially how they could learn from the other people in the school. So there was a lot of exchange between people in architecture, landscape architecture, city planning, design, and a real engagement with diverse clients, people who had other ways of thinking about beauty, thinking about what was appropriate, and really challenging our ideas as professionals, which I think is an ongoing issue for all of us in any school and in any one of the design professions. It really was part of the changes that were happening in architecture during those years as designers took on kinds of commissions that they hadn't taken on before, of low-cost housing, of infrastructure, of very small community buildings that would have seemed insignificant a generation before. It was also a time for a major change in the teaching and new kinds of approaches to the writing of architecture and urban history, parallel in many ways to the work that designers were doing, looking at work that hadn't been designed by major architects, work by builders, housing that was designed by people who lived in it, thinking about other kinds of perspectives and really challenging ourselves in the process. That leads me to 2 points that I'd like to make that I learned here in those years. One was that it wasn't easy. That I think it's often the case today that people will look back at the 70s and suggest that, well, we've gotten past that, even be slightly dismissive and say those were times when people were idealistic socially and politically, and we're now engaged in more complex approaches to the design professions. But the fact is, it was difficult. We fought among ourselves. We fought with other people in the school and other parts of the university. It wasn't self-evident, and I think it becomes important today to realize that those challenges are still facing us. The second is to remember that in giving me this award, which I'm so honored and surprised by, it's not going to an architect. It's going to someone who was primarily a historian. And therefore, it's raising the significance of research for people in the design fields, for understanding the complexities of doing research. I've known people who do their research after the design as a way of legitimating what an idea is. And I think this becomes a very important part of the history of Berkeley and the kind of challenge that all of us want to take on in terms of setting out new ways of thinking about urbanism, of engaging with clients who were very different from our peers, and taking on ways of thinking about this challenge of exploring what a public sphere can be. And it's something that I indeed enjoyed doing in terms of this television program, which was reaching at its height 1 million households on a given night, and a range of different kinds of people, from other professional historians and doctors. My intern has said is like diagnosis. You have to have a lot of knowledge to go about something, but you also can't trust that your first instinct is right. You have to challenge yourself, as well as learning to look very closely. And then the part that was equally wonderful, there would be truck drivers and bellboys who would stop and tell me ways that they had learned to look differently at the objects that they had in their lives, and to think differently about what is beautiful and what is meaningful. And I learned a lot from that. And so I think that becomes an important challenge for all of us at the school, to keep renewing and to remember that sometimes metaphors like that and opportunities like that take us outside of our professional role, and that's very useful. So I'll end with a metaphor that I especially like because it does open up this possibility of public and private sphere, of looking at design and history. And it's to think about the work we do as tacking in a sailboat, that you get where you want to go by moving in one direction and then moving in the other, by responding to the climate and to the environment, and by having a very good time, which is certainly what I had here. So thank you very much.
Well, congratulations to the Distinguished Alumni Award winners. I couldn't be more pleased to see you with your medals, and you will be required to wear them whenever you come to Berkeley. It's now my pleasure to introduce Majora Carter of the Majora Carter Group. She is an internationally renowned urban revitalization strategist and consultant. She is a real estate developer, and she's also a broadcast journalist. She has been responsible for the creation and successful implementation of many green infrastructure projects, policies, and job training and placement programs. And in her role as the head of the Majora Carter Group, which is an innovative economic consulting and planning firm that focuses on putting the green economy and green economic tools to use in American cities, she is really focused on helping Americans in urban dwellers really focused on helping them move out of poverty and to enjoy the benefits of a rebounding economy. Majora's career as an urban planner began just before the turn of the 21st century, when she successfully introduced citywide policy for positive green development. She secured a $1.25 million federal transportation planning grant for a community-driven greenway development, and led a cross-sector effort to develop Hunts Point Riverside Park, all in the South Bronx. She then founded a very innovative nonprofit organization, Sustainable South Bronx, which really was one of the nation's very first and most successful urban green-collar job training and placement systems. Now, she has a long list of awards and honorary degrees, and these include recognitions from very diverse groups, including News Corporation, the Center for American Progress, that's kind of right and left, and Goldman Sachs. She's also the winner of a Peabody Award for her broadcast journalism, and she's also the recipient of a MacArthur Genius Fellowship. So I would like everybody to give a warm welcome to Majora Carter. Majora.
Okay. Congratulations to all of you guys. Man, you make me wish I went to Berkeley. Well, thank you so much again for having me here. And to be a part of this amazing event is just really exciting to me. And especially with the sort of the diverse range of the things y'all were doing. And it speaks to me in a really lovely way. But I want to talk to you a little bit today because, it's just, the idea of resiliency, is something that, someone who's from a poor community and considered underserved in every single way, economically, environmentally, socially, whatever. It all goes down that list. It's been interesting to hear resiliency being talked about so much nationally, especially, but mostly in terms of climate. And as the climate changes, et cetera. And it's been very interesting for me in particular because one of the things that I just recently read about was the fact that I started to understand that regardless of how, yes, the climate is changing, it will continue to change. But the real way that we can become more resilient as a culture was actually through social cohesion. And I started doing a little bit of research around the Chicago heat wave almost 20 years ago. And I'm going to read you just a little bit of this amazing interview with Eric Kleinenberg, who is the author of Heat Wave, A Social Autopsy of a Disaster in Chicago. And so interestingly enough, the surprising fact that emerged is that Latinos, who represent only about 25% of the city's population and are disproportionately poor and sick, accounted for only 2% of the heat-related deaths. Why did the Latino Little Village neighborhood, why did they have such a much lower death rate than the African-American community of North Lawndale? Many Chicagoans attributed the disparate death patterns to the ethnic differences among Blacks, Latinos, and whites, and local experts made much of the purported Latino family values. So I'll editorialize a little bit, which was, frankly, sort of racist, but that's a whole other issue. But there's a social and spatial context that makes close family ties possible. Again, social and spatial context that makes those family ties possible. Chicago's Latinos tend to live in neighborhoods with high population density, busy commercial life in streets, and vibrant open spaces. Most of the African American neighborhoods with high heat wave death rates had been abandoned by employers, stores, and residents in recent decades. The social ecology of abandonment, dispersion, and decay makes systems of social support exceedingly difficult to maintain. The Chicago heat wave was an issue of our climate. We're dealing with the change that we're going through. That kind of stuff is going to continue to happen. But what made communities resilient through what was clearly a devastating event was the social cohesion in that community, which was completely related to how that community was designed and the social and economic structures that were in place, period. And so when I realized that, and knowing full well that the climate's going to continue to change as we go forward, and so if how we continue to plan our communities, knowing full well that we need them to be more resilient, knowing full well that there's going to be, climate changes and economic changes, how are we going to work to create those type of communities that make this happen? And so one of the things that I like to think about as I do my work, and that I've always done, even when I was working on the ground doing grassroots work, as it's called, even though I'd like to consider it was a lot deeper than that too, was I thought about all of our work in terms of a product launch. And the way that we do those things was very simple. How do you identify your market need? If you've got something important that you want to get out to the world, how do you do that? And think about it, is there a market for what it is you're trying to do? And then you have to design this attractive solution. Is the solution that you're thinking something that only you want? Or is it absolutely addressing a need that's out in the market? Then you have to obtain angel investment. Now the investment, yes, it can be money, but it can also be done in the form of influential people who are listening to you and who want to see whatever your project is out there happen. And then you launch your beta version. Does it work? You have to be honest with yourself and check the model out. And then you have to learn from either the mistakes you made or the successes that you've done and how people use it. Are they using your product? Because whether or not you like it or not, people will tell you in one way, shape, or form how it's working for you or them. And then and if it doesn't work, you've got to pivot, or you can go bigger depending on how it works. And that's when you really start looking for the big bucks to actually make your project actually happen. And so for us, in terms of moving that kind of needle forward, again, it started on the ground when I was working and living up in my hometown of the South Bronx in New York City. We were right in the middle of our city deciding that they wanted to build this huge waste facility on our waterfront in response to what was the city's solid waste management crisis. But their big plan was to continuously discriminate against three very, very poor communities, all of color, within New York City, where 95% of the city's waste was being handled. One of them happened to be the South Bronx in New York City. And so we were part of that kind of thing, but I realized that, okay, if we know that the city's planning on doing this, and the state was obviously supportive of that, we had to come up with some kind of issue, something that was out in the ether within the local community that would make them want to work with us in support of another plan. So what was the market need there? We knew that people in the community didn't want another waste facility on the waterfront, but what did they want? They wanted things like parks, because people would take their kids out of the South Bronx, where there really weren't any, for them to experience what life was like a park. So we had a waterfront, but we didn't really know what to do with it at all. So the attractive solution was creating a park. The angel investment, and so this is a dump that was on our waterfront. The angel investment came in the form of a U.S. Forest Service grant that was looking at supporting underutilized and under-resourced rivers throughout the country in urban areas. The Bronx River, which is the only true freshwater river in all of New York City, happened to fall in that category. I wrote the investment came in the form of a $10,000 seed grant that was designed to help communities who wanted to work on that stuff. And we were able to then use that to essentially buy folks volunteers lunch or, develop relationships with local businesses, buy, supplies to use on the ground. And we were able to sort of transform that place, basically take what had been almost 30 years worth of debris and pull it out and then create something that was a lot better than that. And so this was very simply, that little beta version that we launched. But we realized that since we didn't have a culture, of people being able to go to parks within the local community, we learned really quickly, and then this was learning from the actual watching how your product works when you launch it. We realized that we had to program that space very heavily in order for people to come and actually even pay any attention to the fact that there was a park down on their waterfront. So we worked with groups that did environmental stewardship, canoeing, boat building, and brought them down to this little park where they were able to actually develop their own organizations and thus bring people along with them. And that's when we were ready for the big time. This is one of my favorite pictures in the world, because this is at the groundbreaking of a $3 million appropriation from the city that was coming to launch this site. And this is my favorite picture because I've already done my work, and all I'm doing is posing for my picture while the mayor and the parks commissioner are doing the rest of the work. I'm like, my work was done, dude. So there you go. But here we go. And so that $3 million appropriation was able to take us from this beta version into this. And this is the Hunts Point Riverside Park, actually literally a day after it was finished, and back in 2006. And this has become this incredible place for the local folks to come to, and for people to recognize that this kind of beauty can exist in a place like the South Bronx, one of the poorest congressional districts in the country. And also the day after the park was done, I actually got married there, which was really nice. And that dog is the only reason why I even found that dump, because she was an 80-pound dog, and she pulled me into what I thought was just another abandoned lot and dump in the neighborhood. And had I not had an 80-pound dog literally pulling me into that site, there's no way I would have gone in. But that was my puppy girl, Zena. So bless her heart. She was also my flower girl. And so this was the site, of this beautiful place that allowed folks to experience the South Bronx in a completely different way. And there goes Zena with her first National Award for Excellence in Urban Planning. Another market need that we had in the community was just simply safe streets and decent traffic planning. we were lived at the cusp of a community that was residential area and an industrial area. And quite frankly, it was pretty clear that trucks were going to win out. And they did, with accidental deaths and accidents, which people were sadly, the bigger victims right there. And then diabetes and obesity all over the country, but in particular with places where people are not feeling like it's physically pleasing to go outside for a walk, within a local community. We have to deal with how do you create streets that are more consistent with people wanting to live actively outside. Stormwater management, in particular, as we continue, along what's happening around our climate continuing to change, stormwater management is something that our cities are dealing with at an alarming rate. Right now, I don't know if there are too many major American cities that haven't at least given some thought to creating a green infrastructure plan specifically around stormwater management. So dealing with this as a growing expense is going to be something we have to continue to deal with. And so those were the market needs. The attractive solution was this thing that I'd heard about that was all over the country, all over the world, in fact. Actually along the West Side Highway in New York City, but none up in our neighborhood. They were in places as diverse as Copenhagen and Bogota, Colombia, greenways. This dedicated bike and pedestrian path that could be considered a piece of green infrastructure because they were generally green, and places where that would absorb stormwater, but also could provide opportunities for economic development and also, of course, traffic calming and decent traffic management. So we loved that idea, and we were like, okay, we've got to do this. So our angel investment came in the form of a $1.25 million federal transportation grant, and it was there to design the study and the feasibility and design study, rather. And so developing this to create an 11-mile network design of both on-water and on-street bike paths, and as well as a network of parks that were happening along the way, including Hunts Point Riverside Park, which is the first blue dot up there, was really important as well. So the beta version was our early efforts just to make it so that people weren't getting killed by trucks going through the residential area. So these little sort of they were just medians going up the bigger streets, with some cute little stick street trees in them to make it a little more aesthetically pleasing. But we were able to actually create much, with $50 million that came through much bigger investment through city, state, federal, and some private funding. We were able to create these kinds of real stormwater management possibilities here through green infrastructure as well. And of course, it just provided a much nicer thing for people to look at as well. And the traffic calming obviously was a huge, huge deal to go forward. And so this was just when it was first planted, and we can't wait till this winter's over, so we'll see more of the green stuff. But this is one of my favorite pieces because, as you know, greenways they're linear, for the most part, and so they can also serve to connect places to each other, various parks. And so the South Bronx is literally only 25 feet away across a little bit of water from one of the coolest parks in New York City. It's about a 400-acre park called Randall's Island, except it's underneath is what I think is a very interesting, design bridge called Hellgate. But once this is done, and this bridge is going to be finished, being constructed, which will be hopefully this summer, then we'll be able to get to that other beautiful resource. Another market need that we had in the community and still have to this day is jobs. Or lack thereof. We had around that we started this program about a 25% unemployment rate. And people with pretty serious, significant barriers to employment, as it's technically called. So folks who are in and out of the criminal justice system, or folks that are generationally impoverished. So as we were working on all of these ecological projects that were bringing people to, they were basically creating these projects within the South Bronx, we realized that our city was actually bringing in people from outside of the community. And we were like, how about we get our folks some training and they could do some of this work themselves? So creating a green collar job training and placement system specifically around ecological restoration was the way that we responded to that market need, which was, of course, very attractive to the folks that were otherwise not employed. So So we beta tested it, and what we did, so we were training people in the skills of river and wetland restoration, learning how to clean up contaminated lands or brownfield remediation, later on urban forestry management, green roof installation. And the interesting thing about it was that the program actually started with an appropriation from a friendly congressman, and it was costing us about almost $25,000 a year, per cycle, to put people through this program, because we had no idea what we were doing. So we were like teaching them yoga and all sorts of other stuff in addition to the hard skills, of actual ecological restoration and all the certifications that they needed. But we realized that doing that for 5 months was just unrealistic. So the second iteration, we knew that if we wanted to train more people, we had to lower the costs and get them through the training a lot quicker. So that's how we literally changed it. So we were able to get the cost down to less than $7,000, and we were able to train 10 times more people as a result of it. So that was the success of the program. And because of that, we were able to, this kind of success rate that we employed, and again, like most folks that do job training programs, they're happy if they get 50%. Because, and this was after we tracked them for 3 years. So this was an extraordinary placement rate, which I'm very, very, very proud of. And in particular with the folks who were, had such significant barriers, to employment. Again, if you grow up in a place where you don't have folks who are gainfully employed around you, how would you necessarily know, how to be a team player? Or when to know when to take the lead and show a particular initiative in terms of the workforce. How to look busy when your boss is around. I mean, these are the kind of things that, you can laugh, but the bottom line is you all know. But it's because you've been exposed to the world of work, at least in a legitimate way. And even though some of the folks that we worked with were incredible businessmen. But not the type that were, in the legitimate economy. This was able to put them... Yeah, but this was able to give them the kind of wherewithal and presence to be productive members of society, of which I'm incredibly, incredibly proud of. But, so that's what I did when I was working in the South Bronx specifically as the head of Sustainable South Bronx. And I loved it. It was an incredible experience for me, as a hometown girl to come up with solutions to support the community that I cared about, and to know that there could be, that we could take this model in other places. But I left that back in 2008 and started my own consulting firm. And so I took this show on the road because I wanted to take it out there and see what was going on and see if the kind of very practical solutions that we had come up with could work in other parts of the country and even the world. And I've done really nicely, and I'm very excited about that stuff. However, what was fascinating for me over the course of the years, because I'm almost always in my consulting practice, am asked to go to like the South Bronxes of whatever city I'm in. Yeah, it's okay. That's because I appreciate that, and I want to always be helpful there. But the thing that struck me the most was that no matter where I went, going into a low-income community, was that the real estate development was fascinating to me, because there was only two kinds of real estate development in poor communities. There was the kind that assumed that those areas were going to be gentrified, and those folks, the poor folks that were there and lived through the worst times, the high crime, the environmental burdens, the economic disinvestment, all that stuff, were going to be displaced once the neighborhood got better. And the other kind was this kind of assumption that, or what we call poverty level economics. And so you kind of places where you are probably not going to find a decent, healthy grocery store, or the kind of businesses that you really want to support, and that you would like to patronize. Tons of things like 99-cent stores and stuff, or plenty of liquor stores. Not the kind of places where you can build up your financial equity, not at all. And huge, huge amounts of largely subsidized, affordable, quote unquote, affordable housing. So when we looked at all of these things together, we realized that what was being created through this type of, these are all real estate developments, okay? They're all economic developments of one shape or form. They make somebody lots of money. But what they all do when they're all combined all together, all at the same time, is that it simply concentrates poverty. And that is it. And I would love for somebody to disprove that theory. But it's not going to happen. So with that, and watching it play out in my own neighborhood and neighborhoods all over the country, it became really clear to me that there was something else that we can do, especially when we really stop to think about what happens in those communities, where we're basically kind of creating just the right environment for folks, and we're creating the environment for brain drain. You know, if a kid grows up in one of those communities and they happen to show a little bit of talent, we just assume that that kid is going to leave. As a matter of fact, kids like us were taught to gauge our success by how far we got away from communities like that. And Friends and Company included. And it was one of those kids where I was told from a very early age, you're a smart one. And I use education to get myself out. I did. You know, I got myself into the Bronx High School of Science, I went to Wesleyan University, and I swore never, ever, ever to return. And the only reason why I did was because when I started graduate school, I was broke and I needed a cheap place to stay, which was my mom and dad's house. And I still appreciate them for letting me stay, even though I was the youngest of 10, and I'm sure they really didn't want me there, but they let me, and I appreciate that. But the whole idea that what we've done with these two types of real estate development is create a cycle that assumes failure on the part of those communities and creates these structures that allows it to persist. And so I started thinking, and my partners were thinking about, well, what can we do to create the kind of communities where we're expecting the folks in those communities themselves not to be displaced, not to sort of maintain a level of poverty and feel better about it, but to actually create wealth and well-being in those communities of which those original inhabitants are a part of. And we started thinking about, well, what were there times, back in the day where this kind of feeling actually happened. And I started thinking about what were some of the unintended consequences of integration. The fact that, that back in the day, you might have had, or we did have, racially segregated communities by law. And black folks were, they had to live in certain places, regardless of their economic profile. And so it was not uncommon for, say, a black doctor to live near a black janitor. That beautiful mix actually created a sense of social cohesion that allowed those communities, despite some of the really not nice things that were going on in them, it allowed people to be resilient and survive. But then when integration happened and the folks who could afford to move did, what it left, in fact, and you can't blame people for doing it. I totally get that. But what happened was that that economic diversity that allowed for people to feel as though they could and should care about people that they saw right in front of them, that also provided a sense of aspiration for those that might have been born in a lower, economic realm, allowed folks to see each other in ways that you can't see if you're only living across town. It allows people to see the humanity in each other. That kind of economic diversity allows that to happen when everyone within a community sort of sees the impact that they have on each other. And all I could think about was, is there a way that we could recreate the idea of and the structures that would promote economic diversity and do it in a way where whole communities could thrive? And so I started thinking about, well, what have I seen around the country in terms of the way communities are? And this kind of topography, this is a map of my neighborhood, but this kind of configuration is very similar to a lot of post-industrial cities in America, where you've got the orange part, which is the residential area, and the blue part, which is the industrial or formerly industrial area. And then there's always this little area where the two kind of overlap, just a little bit. And it's a really strange place because normal zoning doesn't always apply there. It's just a weird kind of mash up between the two of them. However, again, don't care where you are, you will, if you look hard enough, you will find assets in any community. I don't care how jacked up it may look at first. Like, for example, I didn't know. I knew, well, actually, that's not true. I knew that my neighborhood was a peninsula, surrounded on 3 sides by water. I went to a school called the Hunts Point Peninsula School. I knew that. And I knew that we had we knew we had a Bronx River because I saw it on a subway map. So I knew that this was there. But had I ever been? No. No. It was just like crazy when my dog pulled me into this. I was like, oh my God, there's a river here. Get out. But this is the thing, and that's what helped create the idea for the South Bronx Greenway, which would it fully, even now, it's even its half first stage phases. It's still fabulous. And of course, other assets, we've got great access to public transportation. So there are assets everywhere, which is totally fabulously cool. So that's what we have. And then we've got that kind of weird hinge area in the middle. But what makes a really cool community? The kind of community that people want to stay in. If they grow up in, they don't necessarily want to leave it. That makes them want to come back, that makes people want to visit. What are all those things? First, you've got to house people, right? Quality housing, no matter what. Yes, it should be the green, most sustainable stuff. I'm on the board of the U.S. Green Building Council, so just assume that I appreciate all that good stuff. But the other piece is that you want to have a level of economic diversity in it. Yes, we should absolutely have affordable housing. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. But there should it should be considered transitional housing because just because you're born poor doesn't mean you have to stay poor. It's not a caste society after all. But you also want to have the type of housing that if people that people would stay to be in, even though they could afford to move out. So having housing for a range of incomes and creating the right subsidy mix to make sure that could happen as well. But then going back to the whole economic development profile piece, how do we make sure that we're not just putting Band-Aids on poverty and helping people feel comfortable in the idea that, you're born poor, you're going to stay poor, and it's okay, we'll take care of you and blah, blah, blah. That grosses me out so much I can't even tell you. I'm much more interested in looking at what are the economic trends and training folks to make sure they can participate in that and preparing them to do that and not just expecting for every major economic boom to bypass poor communities the way that they do now. So that's a really interesting thing that we looked at, and we're looking specifically at technology, different types of manufacturing that are actually coming back to this country and really figuring out ways to make that happen more and more. Definitely you want amazing public space. It's because that is the great democratizer. You don't need money to participate in it. If you have it and it's programmed well, what you have is some awesome things going on. And again, it provides opportunities for people of many different income levels, races, ethnicities to see each other in a positive way. So you want that as well. And then last, definitely not least, is you want to figure out ways so that dollars can circulate throughout the local economy many, many times. So much of the money in poor communities, when it's spent there, immediately leaves because they're not owned by folks in the community, and it's just not there. So I know personally, I get on the subway to do my grocery shopping because I'm not going to buy the stuff that's overpriced and not really good in my own neighborhood. And this is a problem. But I'm not the only one. A lot of folks do that. And if you want, God forbid, getting a cup of coffee, in the neighborhood, it's just not going to happen. And we know that people are leaving our neighborhood and going to places like Starbucks, which is 6 subway stops away, because we see Starbucks, cans or cups in the garbage cans in the community. So we know people are spending money on it. So how about we create those types of local economic developments in our own community? And again, definitely opportunities to employ people, but also it creates a sense of vibrancy that wasn't there before, that isn't there now. So creating all this stuff is a really important thing. And we're doing this, my partners and I are doing this through a real estate development approach that is going specifically to the landowners within those communities, because many of them have been there for decades, and not asking them to sell out cheap, which is generally the first phase of gentrification, where somebody, a developer comes in and goes, oh, your property is really cool. Let me pay you a little bit more money than you ever thought you were ever going to get. And then they take it, and then but the people who were there before are not benefiting from it at all. So what we're doing is entering into long-term leases with the property owners there, working on the financing and the development itself. And the people who originally owned that property are the ones benefiting from the community getting better. So it's essentially gentrification without displacement. Like the people in their own communities are the gentrifiers. And I'm totally cool with that, because I'm a little tired of like this romanticism of poverty kind of mentality. Because the last time I checked, poor people like nice things too. And you know what they like the least? Being poor. So let's figure out ways to make sure that they're participating in the economic transformation of their own communities rather than watching somebody else benefit from it. So that's the kind of approach that we're working on. And so one of the things that we're doing, and this is going to be fun, because this property that's on the left side of the screen, this sits right in the hinge area that I was telling you about. It sits on more than 5 acres of land, and it was the former juvenile detention facility for New York City. It was just recently closed back in 2011 when like countless children's rights advocates and prison reform advocates realized that all this thing was doing for the past like almost 50 years was just breaking children down and not supporting them and their rehabilitation, which is often the case in juvenile justice in this country. But again, that's another talk. And you know, it's interesting because my father was a janitor there in the 60s and the 70s. And I remember him talking about how, to my mom, how he wished that our house was bigger so that he could take some of those kids in, because some of them just ended up there because their parents were kind of messed up and didn't have much to do with what the kids did, but he'd watch them get broken. And actually we did take in a bunch of kids from there anyway, or would have ended up there. And it really makes me laugh to realize that, or I wish my father was around so I could tell him, like, Daddy, the youth house. Well, your daughter is going to be applying to redevelop it, and I think he'd be like, well, that's good, baby. But so it's up. It's going to be open for redevelopment pretty soon, and that is exactly one of the places where we want to try those economic development models that are aimed specifically toward economically diversifying the area. But this piece of this particular physical piece of land right here, I think will exemplify what we're trying to do. Because here you have the hinge area, this former juvenile detention facility on this street, this little hinge area. It's not a well-used piece of land. I mean, there's some parking lots, there's a truck engine rebuilding lot, and definitely at least one illegal chop shop, maybe more. But really what this place is known for now is the fact that truckers go there to pick up a prostitute late at night. However, if you change the ground plane to make it appear more like this, where you've got active public space, a vibrant commercial setting, places for people to be and participate and socialize in, then the kind of bad behavior that we see occasionally now is probably not going to happen, at least not that way, which is really good for us right now to see. And so the whole idea around this type of development is not that we create one little sweet, little beautiful site that's just lovely to look at. The idea is more that it raises the bar for what passes for economic development anywhere near it. And to know that that we're trying to create all of those beautiful things that actually create resiliency through social cohesion. And it's not about just making it nice so that other folks can come in and create. It's about how do you repair the social fabric in communities where where it's been torn and ripped apart through various economic, environmental, and social burdens for such a long time. And so to do one of the things that we're talking about in particular around the economic development piece is technology. Back in 2006, we realized that this was the way things were going. We worked with MIT's Fab Lab to bring in the first mobile Fab Lab unit that we've had. And so Fab Lab it's short for Fabrication Laboratory, where you connect personal computers with fabrication machines, and you can pretty much design whatever you want. And that technology, or rapid prototyping, or 3D printing, as it's often called, it's that small lot manufacturing. You could do pretty much anything. And so they're using that design right now to do everything from clothing to furniture to, there's actually surgeons that are using it to create organs for human transplant. And obviously you probably couldn't do it in a place like this, but it is so there. But we brought this here because what we really wanted to do was remind folks in our communities that they could be creators and inventors in their own right. And to have folks in there, and also to challenge the way that they even saw their own communities. Like, could they use something as a resource in it? Like, for example, those wooden pallet boxes. Well, my neighborhood is also home to, I believe, the second world's largest food distribution center. I think the biggest one is in France. And so about 70% of the city's produce, or the region's produce, 100% of its fish, and about 50% of its meats transshipped through our community. Now, we don't get to keep it. It's because most of it's like trucked in and then trucked out, sadly. But much of it comes in on those crazy pallet boxes. Some interesting folks, discovered that when you pull those pallet boxes together, or pull them apart rather, and then lash them together, you could create this kind of furniture. So this was a really nice and perfectly legal little side hustle for some of the young folks that went through the program, and this is one guy with this very satisfied thing. Now, moving further into technology, we are so in that age right now. Like, there is no going back. And now everybody wants everything to work on every device they've ever had, doesn't matter how old or young it is, and that's the way it's working. We are in a multi-platform world. We are also a country that is becoming more diverse by the second. In my region, we were no longer majority white back in 2011. The rest of the world's probably going to follow, the rest of the countries are going to follow through on that at around 2040 or so. So how are we going to be dealing with the fact that we're in this age where technology is everything? We're in a country where everything's about to change pretty soon in terms of it being that multi-ethnic. And and I love this picture because here it is, a line at a Mac store. Just the checkout, the colors of the people that are waiting for what the next big thing on the iPhone is. So we are so there. But then this is also something we're dealing with. I mean, here, you're not worried so much about this here at Berkeley, but the undereducated masses in this country, we should be worried. So here we've got, we're in the technology age. We're a country that's getting more multi-ethnic, but sadly less educated. And how are we going to be competing in the workplace? One of the ways we've responded to that is through Startup Box South Bronx. It's a technology education and entrepreneurship program that we started that's designed to increase the chances for folks within the South Bronx to participate in the technology revolution as it is right now, and the economy in particular. So we started by going into a local high school and teaching young kids how to code. And it was pretty easy to do with the right teacher. Kids are practically coming out of the womb knowing how to use a touch screen. So we are in the tech age. Within a week or so, kids were learning how to code and do their own, create their own video games, and then which they would upload to Google Play and then have to issue updates. So they were learning and how to present it, which was really kind of fantastic. But quite frankly, there are plenty of folks that are working on teaching young kids to code, and they will do it way better than we will. What we noticed, again, going back to what is the market need, was a need to get people within low-income communities to participate economically in the tech economy. And we realized that there were some really interesting ways that nobody was talking about. One of our advisors happened to work for Nickelodeon as the head of games development, and he realized that this thing, people make games, right? The games developers, and design them, but then somebody's got to test it to make sure that it works. So that kind of quality assurance software testing, much of it is offshored. However, so much of that is, in terms of, when you are shooting, one of those violent games that people really seem to love. And if you're shooting in one way and you hit, did the head blow off the right way? People want that stuff to work. So, but that kind of testing is really important, believe it or not. And even for little kids games, it's for even the nice, happy games, I'm sure. But anyway, it's a line item in every developer's budget. And interestingly enough, it's a great way for people to sort of enter into the games development world, and also other types of software development too. And it's an entry-level job that teaches that sort of reverse engineering about what makes a game work, what makes it doesn't work, how to identify the bugs, how do you build it better. So for example, the head of electronic arts started off as a quality assurance games tester. And we know that the market for games is getting bigger by the second. It's going to be bigger than movies pretty soon, I'm pretty sure. And some, believe me, some game companies are bigger than a lot of studios. So, but we started doing, so we started looking at how do we kind of onshore some of that work, and bring it to folks that actually have the cultural game vernacular and who kind of need some entry-level support to move into this work. And we started first by doing these testings or trainings with Nickelodeon, then a smaller company called Tresenza, and we plan on doing a bunch more to bring in folks who are learning, the protocols of quality assurance testing, and then creating the way to do this to support these kind of companies here at home. And here's why. These are old numbers at this point, and we're looking for numbers to update this. But basically, this is a lot. This is a huge industry that's getting bigger by the second. So we brought in these cohorts, from the local community, taught folks how to do the protocols, connected them with the folks within the community. Within the game development community, taught them how to do it, and then they were able to do these little 2-week trials that was free to the software company, but provided training for us. And our goal is that we're going to become a subcontractor to these games developer companies, within the New York City region. And we think this kind of model could actually translate further out, outside of the area as well. And so bringing people in to do real work that needs to be done and that people are very happy to see happen, and do it in a way that allows them to be a part of the emerging economy within the community. And the idea is that what we want to do is not just, do the extractive thing of like identifying, who the really, really smart kids are, getting them into like the best colleges so they could go off and become engineers. A lot of the folks in our communities that's not going to happen. So, but how do we prepare them to participate in ways where they feel like and they know that they have a career ladder to move up to? And so a good part of this is keeping these folks within the local community. And so I literally just got the keys for these 2 little spaces on the avenue right up the street. And this is going to be the programming space where Startup Box, hosts not only our quality assurance software testing business, but also in the evenings we'll be doing things like speaking series and seminars and hackathons that are designed to show people, just the general community about all the very broad ranges of different types of work within technology. And then last but definitely not least, we want people to spend $4 and $5 on a cappuccino in our community. So we are opening up the first Wi-Fi cafe that we've had there as well. So we're very excited about seeing all of these things happen as we grow up. And what was so funny was that there was an industry report that came out through the software industry, and they asked kids what they want to be when they grow up. And so, yeah, the first 3 were definitely, movie star, pop star, sports star. But number 5 on that list was, I want to be a game developer. So this is where people's minds are going as we move into this tech age, and it's becoming even bigger for us all. And so we want to be a part of those trends as they change, the world that we are moving into. And I love this quote because it reminds me so much of the impatience that we need to have if we're going to move our communities, from these socially, economically, environmentally challenged places, into more resilient ones. We need to be impatient, truly impatient with finding practical ways to support the quality of life that doesn't just impact the folks, those really challenged communities, but also creates better health and well-being for the entire region that they're in. Because look, a chain is only as strong as its weakest link. And if we continue to create and create the conditions for less social cohesion, which means less resilient communities, that's stuff that we all pay for in one way, shape, or form. And that's not the kind of thing that we know that we have to deal with. We know we have to deal with it, but there are ways, very practical ways, that restore and regenerate communities. And that I'm personally dedicated to seeing happen. And I know all of you are as well, because we've seen how we can build, all sorts of tributes to our collective failures. But now is the time for us to start building monuments to hope and possibility for all of us. Thank you very much.